All right, so what do we got to get together here? It's a Who are you? What do you mean? I'm Link. Uh, no, you're not? Yes, I am. I'm the star of that new Nintendo Switch game, The Time of Bad Guy. I mean, haven't you heard of it? What? The Time of Bad Guy. It just came out on the Switch not too long ago. You know, you go through and you get everybody. Dude, do you mean Age of Calamity? Yes? You're telling me you don't even know your own game? What kind of bargain bin Link are you? I'm pretty certain it's called Time of Bad Guy, but whatever. Also, what is up with that beard? I mean, just what? Hey, now you don't have to be mean. Can you just get to whatever it is you're doing here? You mean reviewing Age of Calamity? Yeah, sure, whatever. Your beard is stupid. What was that? Nothing, just get on with your review. Anyway, it's been almost 4 years since one of my favorite games of all time, Zelda Breath of the Wild, released on the Nintendo Switch. And now we have more content within that specific part of the franchise that we can dig into with Age of Calamity. Now, I love Hyrule Warriors. I mean, I owned it on Wii U, 3DS, and now I own the definitive edition on Switch. Really like that game a lot. And Breath of the Wild is my favorite Zelda game of all time. So earlier this year, when it was announced that these two game worlds would be combining into one, I was so excited. Now, Age of Calamity is a drastically different Zelda game as opposed to all of the other Zelda games that have come before it. It is a Warriors type game, and I think it kind of fits because this is the incoming war from Calamity Ganon, right? So there's a lot of action, a lot of fighting. So it makes sense. But first of all, I do want to make a distinction here. So what is a Warriors type game? What do I mean when I say that? What I mean is there's a franchise called Dynasty Warriors, and there's like a bazillion of these games. And there's all sorts of other spin-offs and whatever. And in these Warriors games, you are like a superhuman fighter on the battlefield, and you take out hundreds and sometimes even thousands of opponents with ease. Like, you were just so typically overpowered, it's crazy. It's more about micromanaging the battlefield, sending people to places, and going to places yourself. So you're very overpowered, no puzzles whatsoever, just drastically different from a Zelda game. Now, Age of Calamity is not a Warriors game with the Zelda skin on it, kind of like Hyrule Warriors a little bit. This is a Zelda game with Warriors type gameplay, and I wanted to make that distinction here. Also, before we get into it here, I do want to specify it would be incredibly hard to talk about this game without going into spoiler territory, so there will be spoilers. However, before I lose you, there will be a section that I will sanction off that it will be spoiler territory, and I will let you know beforehand and where to skip to when it gets to that point. So don't you worry your pretty little heads, because I will not spoil anything unless you choose to be spoiled yourself. So let's get to it. Age of Calamity takes place 100 years before the events in Breath of the Wild, when Calamity Ganon was a terrifying prophecy rapidly growing into a terrifying reality. Though we don't get to see the everyday life of Hyrule before the Fallen Land we experienced in Breath of the Wild, we get to see who many of these characters were before everything, well, went to hell. That means that, yes, you will have a lot of time with the champions, including my girl Urbosa, Impa, Zelda, and all the others. However, there is one teeny tiny, itsy bitsy little thing in this game that there was no mention of in Breath of the Wild, and that would be the Egg Baby. Yes, this little guardian egg is a newcomer, and well, Yeah, I'll get to that later in the video. Anyway, Zelda, Link, and Impa set out with this adorable little musical egg guardian to gather allies and embolden an army to fight the King of Calamity. There is where I'm going to stop in regard to the story because, whew boy, yeah, we don't want to get into the spoilers yet. So let's talk about that gameplay, shall we? Age of Calamity is broken up into side quests, main story quests, and upgrades that can be purchased with various materials found in both of these types of quests, along with challenges. Now, I'm trying to be somewhat vague here so as to not spoil anything for anyone, but the general gameplay loop is this. The player goes into a mission, watches any story cutscenes, if doing a main quest, proceeds to meet whatever the battle conditions are, then uses anything that was obtained within the quest to upgrade characters and markets. Though much of the battle system involves beating the snot out of moblins, bokoblins, and so many other Ganon monsters, there are various missions thrown into the mix, such as escorting someone across the battlefield. As I said earlier, a typical Zelda game, this is not. You won't find crazy puzzles or anything like that. In fact, the most exploring you'll really do are for little Koroks that are hidden in various missions across the map. Yes, you heard me right. You'll once again be searching for all those little golden poops in Age of Calamity. Anyway, before going into a mission, the player is able to select the warrior of their choice, unless there are specific mission constraints on who can be a playable character, that character's current stats, what type of weapon to equip, and what clothing pieces to equip. Next, the player has the option to cook food, all of which do different things, such as adding an experience modifier or increasing the damage your warrior can inflict within that one selected mission. These are temporary and only last for one mission, but they can be pretty handy depending on the mission. Once on the battlefield, the player navigates by using either the minimap located toward the bottom right to view objectives, or they can select the map menu by pausing the game. Once in the pause menu, you can direct other warriors that may be on the battlefield to specified areas of the map, and you'll definitely want to get used to doing this, as it is extremely helpful to direct one character to an area of the map, go fight in a different area, then have the ability to switch between the characters on the fly. Strategy and micromanagement are key here and add a level of depth to the otherwise hack and slash nature of the gameplay. Also, there are some mechanics that will help the player take out foes more effectively. Each larger enemy, basically any non-scrub enemies, has a stagger gauge that triggers depending on the attack they use. Not only does hitting the enemy while the gauge is triggered inflict more damage on said enemy, but it will cause them to stagger once fully depleted, and the player can then effectively whomp on the baddie with a specialized attack by pressing the X button. In addition to stagger gauges, some attacks can be countered with the Sheikah Slate, as seen in Breath of the Wild. Right before the enemy's devastating attack unleashes, an icon will appear above them. If the player uses the right Sheikah Slate command, then it instantly puts the enemy into a stagger. The commands that can be used are Stasis, which freezes enemies, Cryonis, which utilizes ice in some fashion, Magnesis, which can grab metallic enemy weapons and throw them back, and Remote Bombs. This is such a cool gameplay feature mixed in with warrior-style combat, and what's more is that each character actually uses these commands differently. So, Link's Remote Bombs function differently than, say, Mipha's. This adds even more depth to the combat. And speaking of depth, this game also adds some nice variety to just the normal Warriors type game mechanics, and this is where my distinction from earlier comes into play. This isn't a Warriors game with a Zelda skin on it, but rather a Zelda game with Warriors gameplay in it. I won't go into details what some of these mission variations are, but they are a really nice change of pace. Before I get started gushing about this game, there are two things I want to address that I was not a fan of: the timed missions and the performance. Many missions in the game have a time limit, and while most of them are fine and at a nice level of difficulty, keeping things at a brisk pace, there are some that are just simply ridiculous. I didn't really care for many of the defeat X amount of enemies within X amount of time missions. These were boring, and maybe it was because I was playing on hard. Oh, which by the way, there are multiple difficulty settings, but I would be over the recommended character level by, I don't know, 2 or 3, and still barely make the time limit or barely miss it. These missions could have simply been removed, and it would have been fine. And look, okay, you've probably seen in many other places already that the performance isn't always the best in Age of Calamity, and I am here to tell you, yeah, that's pretty accurate. Look, I don't mind it being set at 30 frames per second, though 60 would be ideal, of course, but it does dip pretty drastically in some parts. The good news, though, it was never enough to really hurt the overall experience, and it was never a huge point of contention for me. Well, yeah, that's just me. Also, honestly, all the cool little details that tie into Breath of the Wild more than made up for the performance issues. Details like when you gather food out in a battlefield, which can be used to heal yourself when needed, and you happen to get hit with some type of fire attack from an enemy, the food gets cooked, so your apples turn into cooked apples. Or even just similar movesets and animations to Breath of the Wild. It's all just so freaking cool. And plus the visual design and character designs are so good. And I've loved the art style since I was first introduced to it with Breath of the Wild. Okay, so if you haven't played the game yet and don't want to be spoiled on anything, now is the time to skippity bippity right on ahead to the timestamp here. Are you gone? Are they gone? Yeah? Alright, my spoilery friends, you cool cats, let's jump into the spoiler minefield and discuss the story. In short, I like what they did, but it will ultimately depend on what Breath of the Wild 2 does, at least for me. So let's just wrap up what happens in a quick nutshell here. Little Egg Baby Guardian gave a glimpse into the future, the events that we know about from Breath of the Wild and after Calamity Ganon wins the war. But it turns out the heroes from the future glimpsed back and were brought back. The future heroes, including the constantly awesome Prince Sidon, are brought into this timeline to help this Zelda, Link, and friends with their current Ganon problem. It's this that turns the battle and ultimately leads to a happy ending, with the Calamity being calmed down and taken out. This could rub some people the wrong way, and I get that. But this was kind of cool in a couple of ways. For one, let's say that Breath of the Wild 2 just completely disregards this new / alternate timeline. Sure, this sort of renders Age of Calamity useless as far as a story goes. However, for those who didn't want canon messed up and altered in any way, well, you can treat Age of Calamity as just a spin-off that's self-contained. For one, that means that Nintendo's finally just fully leaning into the whole multiple timelines thing. They've played around with time travel before, but like the whole multiple timelines and splintering and fracturing it all, that means they're fully leaning into that. And then also, it just could create some really cool things for Breath of the Wild 2. You know, they can utilize those multiple timelines, or they can just kind of expand this particular part of the Zelda universe, the Breath of the Wild universe, in many different ways, and they can try different things because there are technically multiple timelines. That sounds kind of cool to me, actually. And it would make Age of Calamity actually canon to the Breath of the Wild part of the series, so I'd really like that a lot. So either way, I can honestly say I enjoyed what Nintendo did here. They surprised me. It was not what I expected it to be, and it opened up new possibilities for Breath of the Wild 2 and other games in the series. So that potential is super cool to me. Now, if they whether or not they capitalize on it, that's a different story. You know, Breath of the Wild 2 comes out and it just follows with Breath of the Wild 1 and just disregards Age of Calamity, then, you know, whatever, Age of Calamity gets forgotten and you know, into obscurity. But I appreciated it, and it was just so over the top, and it blended well with Zelda, which is really weird to say. Oh, and speaking of over the top, I really enjoyed the final boss fight. It felt like an actual final boss fight, and what I appreciated was I was playing on the hard difficulty, but it never felt too easy, but it also didn't feel like cheap hard, like, oh, I'm just gonna bump everything up and make it ridiculous. It utilized various things that you had gained over the story. It was good. I really, really enjoyed it for what it was. And it was kind of cool seeing Ganon in a form that resembled, I was familiar with, resembled a look that I was familiar with. So that was kind of cool. And honestly, I gotta say, how Zelda and Link sealed Calamity Ganon, that was so freaking cool. I love that cutscene. That was great. I've watched it a couple times because, I don't know, man, it was just like, ugh. Hello and welcome back, my non-spoilery friends. I want to talk about one last thing, and I saved it for last because it is pretty great. The music. Man, there are a lot of tracks, and they are all just top-notch. Typically, the Warriors games that I've played all involve really high-octane music throughout. Age of Calamity, though?
Okay, so you
got slower music, swells, heart-pumping tunes, and so much more. It's all so good. Just listen for a minute. Age of Calamity is a fantastic game. Even with the performance issues and with those timed missions that just rubbed me the wrong way, it still is a contender for Game of the Year for me. Although it won't be, because Hades is really that good. But it's still so good. The music is great, the combat is fun, the visual presentation's great. Everything's just really good about it. Oh, and you know what else I really like? Okay, cool, I got it from here. So, sure, the story could rub some people the wrong way. Maybe they don't really like how it played out or just like it in general. I get that, totally understand. Everything is from perspective and your own personal preference. For me, I really liked it. I really liked it, and combined with the awesome Warriors gameplay there, it was a no-brainer for me. I loved it. Also, this game gave me the itch, yet again, to go back into Breath of the Wild. I mean, every 6 months I get the itch to get back into that game for various reasons. And this game made me want to get back into that and go, man, I really need to revisit that Hyrule, that fallen Hyrule again. And there is plenty to do in this game. I mean, I have some things on my Twitter account that I posted that it was just hilarious to me, where it was like, cool, I completed a mission. Okay, well, maybe I'll go check out the next one. And it was just like, boom, here's a thing to do. 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 So that wraps it up. You could probably guess that I really liked it. But do you have any final words, Bargain Bin Link? Good game is good? Well, I guess that'll do it for this video. Thanks for watching. Take it easy. Let me know what you think of Age of Calamity, or maybe you haven't gotten it yet and this video swayed you to go pick it up right now, or maybe it swayed you to never touch it with a 10-foot pole. Let me know down in the comments. Appreciate you watching. Till next time, take it easy.